am Count Sanguine, but you can call me the Blood Count. Are you my type? Come inside and find out.
If you want to know the long and the short of it, just meet me inside. And I do mean inside.
Brush up on your dental knowledge inside. Learn the whole tooth and nothing but the tooth.
I'm Edward Jenner, and I'm sure you'll get my point inside. How do you do? I am Count Sanguine, and I'm always happy to meet a new friend. Ah, I can tell you have come to ask about my favorite food, subject, blood. I've done a lot of research on blood, and I can tell you everything there is to know about it, about its color, its composition. I find it a very tasty topic indeed. Now, what would you like to know first? Where do you get all those billions and billions of delicious little red blood cells that I love to snack on? Well, they're made in a reddish-gray spongy substance in your bones called marrow. If you look at a cross-section of a bone under a microscope, you can see a network of blood vessels and connective tissue fibers. Between these are marrow cells, and that's where blood cells are made. When the blood cell is still in the marrow, it has a nucleus like most other cells. The nucleus controls the activities of the cell, such as creating protein and reproducing. But when the cell leaves the marrow and goes into the bloodstream, it loses its nucleus. Now, its job is to carry oxygen from the lungs to the body's tissues and to carry away carbon dioxide. Some animals have a stingy number of large blood cells, while others have a generous supply of small ones. It all depends on how much oxygen the animal needs in its body. Worms, for instance, carry oxygen in the liquid portion of their blood, not in the blood cells. Cold-blooded amphibians, like frogs, have large and relatively few cells in their blood. Animals that are small, warm-blooded, and live in mountainous regions have the most blood cells. Since there is less oxygen in the higher altitudes, these animals need more blood cells to carry that oxygen through their bodies. Blood red, my favorite color. But what makes it that way? Blood is red because its cells contain a red-colored substance called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin produces the red color when there's oxygen in the blood. When blood is on its way back to the lungs, it contains no oxygen. Blood that's low in oxygen is gray, or a dull brownish red when it's seen through the veins. But blood is more than just red cells. The liquid part of the blood is called plasma. The plasma contains proteins, including antibodies to fight disease, fats, salts, and other substances. Still, there are so many red cells, or red corpuscles, that all the blood looks red. There are about 25 trillion of these tiny flat discs swimming through your blood vessels all the time. About 2 million red blood cells bite the dust every second. On the average, red corpuscles live only 4 months. Then they're removed by the spleen and the liver and eliminated with other body wastes. But new red cells are constantly being produced in the bone marrow, so there are always enough red blood cells in your body. Isn't that a relief? For me too. You will most likely always have enough blood in your body, even if you cut yourself and lose some. In fact, when you do get a cut, cells called platelets make the blood thicken into clots. Then the clot hardens and forms a crust, or scab. When the skin underneath the scab heals, the scab falls off. The human body could never contain enough blood to suit my tastes, but for your uses there's plenty. An adult body contains a little less than 6 quarts of blood. In a single drop of blood there are around 300 million red cells. In fact, if all the blood cells in your body were joined together in a chain, they would stretch 4 times around the earth. Every second, 2 billion blood cells pass by the air chambers of the lungs, picking up oxygen to bring to all the organs of the body. And did you know that people who live in high altitudes have more blood cells? That's because the air is thinner at higher altitudes. That is, there's not as much oxygen in it. The body makes up for this by producing more blood cells to bring enough oxygen to the organs. So, a person living in the Swiss Alps may have 25% more blood cells than a person living in Los Angeles. Did you know that blood comes in 4 flavors? I mean types. There are 4 main blood groups, A, B, AB, and O. People with AB or AB types of blood have a certain protein in the red cells. People without the protein have O-type blood. It is important to know which type you are, because if you ever need a blood transfusion, you have to get a blood type that's right for your body. AB is the rarest type of blood, and O is the most common. Hospitals always test for blood type to make sure you're getting the kind you need. People with AB blood can use blood from all other groups, and anyone can use blood type O. There's also a protein in the blood called the Rh factor. People with this factor are called Rh positive, and those without it are Rh negative. Usually, it doesn't mean much to us, but it can lead to trouble if the 2 types mix. Although white blood cells aren't nearly as tasty as red ones, they're still very important to your body. White cells, called leukocytes, fight infection and disease. One form of leukocyte is the granular cell or granulocyte. Granulocytes are your body's first line of defense. They can go to the spot where germs or injured tissue have collected. There, they destroy bacteria by eating it. When they die, they turn into pus. Pus is just a collection of dead white blood cells. Another form of leukocyte, known as monocytes, also destroys bacteria and other foreign material when there is an infection. Together with other cells in the tissues, monocytes remove dead and damaged tissue to keep them away from healthy tissue cells. Monocytes control other white cells called lymphocytes. When there is infection, lymphocytes increase in number and produce chemicals called antibodies. Antibodies help fight off the infection. As far as I am concerned, you can have as many white blood cells as you like, but your body might disagree. Having too many white blood cells is a sign of leukemia, also known as cancer of the blood. When someone has leukemia, his white blood cells just continue to divide and reproduce, and they don't grow into the healthy active cells that are needed to fight off infection and disease. Modern medicine has many ways of dealing with leukemia, and it's not always the killer disease it once was. But it's still deadly in many cases, and scientists are hard at work trying to find a true cure, and even a possible prevention for leukemia and other forms of cancer. Blood pressure is that little twinge you feel when I nip your neck. Just kidding. It's really a measure of how strongly the blood is flowing through your veins. Blood pressure is created when your heart contracts to pump blood through the arteries and around the body. These contractions produce pressure, like the pressure of water in a shower. And that's what we call blood pressure. Your blood pressure can be measured by an instrument with a wonderful name, a sphygmomanometer. A sphygmomanometer is that inflatable cuff the nurse wraps around your upper arm. There's a rubber bulb attached to the cuff by a tube, and when the bulb is pumped, the cuff inflates. As the air is released, the nurse or doctor measures your blood pressure. Blood pressure is measured in millimeters of mercury. Normal blood pressure for an adult is about 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury. Your blood pressure isn't always the same. It goes up when your heart is contracting and drops when your heart is resting. The contracting pressure is called systolic pressure, and the resting pressure is known as diastolic pressure. Your blood pressure reading contains both measurements, systolic over diastolic. So, a reading of 150 over 90 means 150 millimeters of pressure when the heart is contracting and 90 millimeters of pressure when the heart is relaxing. Doctors don't all agree about what readings mean that your blood pressure is too high, but experts say that in general, blood pressure higher than 150 over 90 millimeters of mercury is too high for most adults. High blood pressure can produce headaches, dizziness, and the feeling of tiredness, among other things, and must be treated by a doctor.
Have you ever wondered why you don't wear down your teeth from all that chomping, chewing, and brushing all day long? It's because your teeth are hard as a rock. Teeth are made up of mineral salts, mainly calcium and phosphorus. Every tooth has two parts. The roots anchor it to the jawbone, and the crown is the part that can be seen in your mouth. The crown is covered with a hard, shiny substance called enamel. A bone-like material called cementum covers the root. Dentine, an ivory-like substance, forms most of the tooth you see in your mouth. There's a hollow space inside each tooth called the pulp cavity, where there are nerves, veins, and arteries. These enter the tooth at the root end. So even though your pearly whites are hard as a pearl on the outside, they are very sensitive on the inside. So give them proper care and they'll continue to give you something to smile about. The 32 teeth in your mouth come in 4 different shapes and sizes, and each has a different job to do. Click on any tooth to find out about its job. These big teeth in the back of the mouth are molars. They grind up food to get it ready to swallow. These are the bicuspids, also called premolars. They tear food and crush it as well. The cuspids, also called canines, have sharp, pointy crowns. Their job is to tear the food. The big teeth in the front of your mouth are called incisors. They specialize in cutting off bites of food. You've probably noticed that your teeth are different from your cat's teeth or your dog's. Every animal, man included, has teeth particularly suited to its way of life and the food it eats. Beasts of prey, meat eaters, usually have sharp, tearing teeth. Cows and other plant eaters have grinding teeth. Man has what is known as collective dentition, which means that he has many different kinds of teeth, one alongside the other. Scientists say this shows that the human body is suited to a mixed diet of meat and plants. They're especially interested when they find a fossil tooth because it can be an important clue as to whether an extinct animal was a meat eater or a plant eater. We can look at the teeth of modern animals to tell us about their diet habits. Pick an animal and find out what it eats. The beaver has long, gnawing teeth, great for chewing through trees. The squirrel has strong, gnawing teeth that can even cut through the hard shell of a nut. Now, don't try this trick at home. Some snakes' teeth are set inward at an angle. That gives them a strong bite that is impossible to escape. Have you ever noticed a dog's long, sharp front teeth? These teeth can catch and hold prey. The sharp back teeth are used to cut up flesh and bones. The pike has movable teeth. They fold backward as food is swallowed, then straighten up again. Some sharks have blunt teeth for crushing shellfish. Others have sharp, cutting teeth for eating fish. You've probably heard that eating too much candy causes tooth decay. But do you know why? It's because the bacteria in your mouth feed on the sugar. Decay usually begins with a small defect in a tooth's enamel. Bacteria in the mouth produce acids that dissolve the enamel and the dentine underneath. This may eat away the dentine and create a cavity, which is just another word for a hole. When the hole enlarges and gets close to the pulp cavity, nerves inside the tooth become sensitive to heat and cold. If the decay continues and the acid eats into the pulp cavity, you get a toothache. When bacteria infect the inside of the tooth, eventually the vessels that supply food to the tooth wither away, and the tooth dies. You can even see this bacteria when it builds up on a tooth. It's called plaque. Brushing your teeth well every day is one way to get rid of bacteria and prevent tooth decay. Everyone can take steps toward preventing tooth decay, and the earlier you start, the fewer trips to the dentist you'll need. Fluoride is a strong decay preventative that works by strengthening the enamel. There may be fluoride in your drinking water and in the toothpaste you use. It's also important to use your toothbrush properly. And try to brush after every meal. If you can't, try rinsing out your mouth with water or even eating an apple. They both reduce the amount of bacteria on your teeth. Try to stick to a diet low in sugar because sugar helps cause cavities. And here's a helpful hint. If you eat candy, eat it with other foods so that the sugar in the candy can't coat your teeth. Also, ask your dentist about flossing and other ways to prevent cavities. When astronauts go into outer space, they take a supply of oxygen with them. But here on Earth, all you have to do is take a deep breath of air. When you breathe in through your nose, the air is warmed, cleaned, and then goes down the windpipe. In the chest, the windpipe splits into two bronchial tubes, each heading to a different lung. These tubes branch into even smaller ones, and each of the tiniest tubes opens into a cluster of thin-walled air sacs in the lungs. The air sacs are bunched like grapes and are surrounded by tiny blood vessels called capillaries. The capillaries are filled with blood that has just made its rounds through the body and now contains carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide passes from the blood into the air sacs, and the blood fills with oxygen. The heart then pumps blood throughout the body, bringing the oxygen in the blood to the other organs and cells. So where do you think we get all this oxygen that we need to stay alive? Well, believe it or not, it all comes from plants. Plants breathe too, in a way. Through small pores in their leaves, they take in the carbon dioxide that we breathe out, and then they release the oxygen that we breathe in. So plants and animals need each other for survival. In fact, there couldn't be any oxygen-breathing life on this planet without plants. You probably don't give swallowing a second thought, especially when you're enjoying your favorite foods. But swallowing is actually a complicated process with a lot of steps. First, your teeth cut and grind the food, which is mixed with saliva. The tongue forms the food into a soft mass called a bolus. As the food heads for the throat, the soft palate in the roof of your mouth raises to block the food from going to your nose instead. Now the food starts down the pharynx. Here, the epiglottis, cartilage at the back of the tongue, covers the top of the windpipe, which is for breathing. The food then goes into the esophagus, a 10-inch tube surrounded with strong muscle which forces the food into the stomach. You know what happens when food goes down the windpipe instead of the esophagus? You start to cough. That's what's called going down the wrong pipe. You know how you squeeze toothpaste out of a tube to brush your teeth? Well, the muscles of the esophagus push food toward the stomach in much the same way. The walls of the esophagus have muscle fibers that contract and push the food along. Nerve endings in the esophagus tell the muscles when to contract. Liquids go down quickly, but solids take about 8 seconds. So you see, swallowing isn't just a matter of food dropping down into your stomach. It takes strong muscles to force it down. That's why it's possible to eat while you're lying on a couch or even upside down. And that's also how astronauts can eat and drink in outer space, where there's no gravity. Do you know people who are on diets because they think they're too fat? In our efforts to keep our bodies trim and fit, fat has gotten a bad name. But we need a certain amount of fat. Fat serves as stored food for our bodies. When we don't eat enough food, our body begins to use its fat reserves instead. Fat is the most efficient energy food that we know. It produces more heat than an equal amount of sugar, which is the body's normal daily fuel, and has about twice the energy value of sugar. The normal male body contains about 10% fat, while the normal female body has about 25%. But this doesn't mean that you would look overweight. Fat only begins to show when you're storing a lot more than your body needs. That's the kind of fat people want to diet away. Aside from its use as stored food for energy, fat does several other important jobs in our body. First of all, fat helps to keep us warm. It's also very good padding for our bones because when fat is squeezed, it bounces back instead of squashing in. That protects our skeleton from bumps and bruises, which might otherwise break bones. Perhaps you've never thought about it, but we don't have fat on all parts of our bodies. We usually don't have fat in our ears, nose, forehead, or at the joints of our bones. But we do have fat in our buttocks, cheeks, the area our eyes rest in, and the palms of our hands. Just think, if you didn't have enough fat on your rear end or the bottom of your feet, just sitting on a chair or walking around the house would be awfully painful.
Yeah, they say rear end in this game, even though it's educational, in the early 90s. Go figure.
If you've ever seen a picture of intestines, you might have thought they looked like a bundle of giant sausages. But your intestines do the important job of breaking down the food you eat so your body can get energy. Our small intestines are 23 feet long. Not very small at all. In fact, that's more than twice the distance from the floor of a basketball court to the rim of the basket. The walls of the intestines are mostly muscles. Food travels first through the small intestines, which are made up of a series of loops. The food stays in each loop for about a half an hour, while digestive fluids work to break it down. Then the food is absorbed by the body. By the time the food goes on to the large intestine, it's already been mostly digested. The large intestine breaks down the coarser parts of the food we eat, such as fruit skins, and extracts valuable vitamins that our bodies need. The inner walls of your intestines are lined with millions of tiny, delicate fibers called villi, which make the surface look almost like velvet. Among the villi are 20 million tiny glands that release 5 to 10 gallons of digestive fluid into the intestines to break down food. When the food leaves the small intestine and goes to the large intestine, most of the nutrients have been absorbed. In the large intestine, water is absorbed, and bacteria break down the digested food into needed vitamins. By the way, the large intestine is between 3 and 15 feet long, much shorter than the small intestine. So why is it called the large intestine? Because the diameter, its thickness, is larger than that of the small intestine. You can't feel your hair grow, and you can't see it grow, but you sure can tell it's grown when the hair that used to be brushed back over your ears ends up in your eyes. Your hair grows rather slowly, about ½ inch a month or about 6 inches a year. Of course, everyone's hair grows at a slightly different speed. And hair doesn't grow forever. It will only grow to be so long and then it stops. However, this length is different for everyone. Here's a funny way to think of it. If all the hair on an adult's body, not just the head, grew in a sort of a hair cable rather than in individual hairs, do you realize that the hair would grow 6 inches every 5 minutes? That adds up to 37 miles in a year. Just imagine how busy that would keep the local barber. Even hair has to rest every now and then, so it doesn't grow at the same rate all the time. When does it rest? Click on one of the clocks to find out. When you wake up, your hair begins to grow faster. It grows at its fastest pace between 10 and 11 in the morning. From late morning to mid-afternoon, your hair growth slows down and sort of takes a nap. Maybe that's because of all the work it did early in the morning. In the late afternoon, your hair suddenly starts speeding up again. At night, your hair grows very slowly, but then everything else in your body slows down too. Why should hair be different? Did you know that we receive 80% of all our information through our eyes? The human eye is like a ball-shaped camera with a little bulge at the front. There's a hole in that bulge called the pupil, and it looks black because it opens into the dark inside of the eye. Surrounding the pupil is the iris, a colored ring that opens wide in low light and becomes smaller in bright light. The iris controls how much light comes through the pupil and into the lens of the eye. The lens focuses the light and projects a picture on the back of the eyeball. Here at the retina, 130 million light-sensitive cells send messages through the optic nerve to the brain. Though the eye is smaller than a ping-pong ball, it can process more than 500,000 messages at one time and send them to the brain at the speed of 300 miles per hour. That's almost as fast as a speeding bullet. Our eyes don't allow us to see all by themselves. Our brain has a lot to do with it, too. It's the brain that interprets the light and tells us what we're looking at, how far away it is, how fast it's moving, and everything else we need to know when we're looking around. Not only that, but the lens in your eye turns images upside down. It's your brain that turns the information right side up and figures out what it is. And how do we know what color things are? Color messages are thought to be received only as red, green, or blue. Your brain processes the combinations of these colors and comes up with all the colorful variations that you know. You say you like pizza? Did you know that when you say you like the taste of a food, you're also saying that you like the smell? That's because both your tongue and your nose work together. Your tongue uses taste buds. You can see them if you look in the mirror. The taste buds in the back of the tongue are most sensitive to bitter tastes. The ones on the sides sense sour and salt. The tip of your tongue picks up sweet flavors, and the center of your tongue has no taste buds at all. But at least half of what seems like taste is actually smell. To prove this, just blindfold a friend and have him pinch his nose so he can't smell anything. Then have him bite into an apple and a pear. He'll have a hard time trying to tell the difference. Now trade places and have him do it to you. You'll be surprised at how difficult it is to identify different foods. Other animals have taste buds too, but some have more than others. Click on a color to find out more. The antelope has 50,000 taste buds, more than enough to know how to appreciate a really good meal. The cow has 35,000 taste buds. That's a lot of taste buds just to enjoy grass. Human beings have 10,000 taste buds, and although we have only 4 taste sensations, together they make up the wonderful variety of tastes that we enjoy. The pig has 5,500 taste buds, and even with all those taste buds, pigs will eat almost anything. The whale swallows whole schools of fish without even chewing them. Not much point in having many taste buds. It has very few, if any. You probably don't look forward to a doctor poking a needle in your arm, but vaccinations are important because they contain medicine that prevents you from getting certain diseases. How does it work? Well, your body has the ability to stop you from getting some illnesses. This ability is called immunity. How do we get immunities? Sometimes by catching certain diseases like measles, smallpox, and chickenpox. Then the body builds up a lasting immunity, and you rarely get those diseases again. So scientists have developed vaccines made of weak forms of the virus that causes a disease. With an injection of vaccination, we fool our bodies into thinking that we actually have the disease, and our bodies develop an immunity to it. Then when we're really exposed to the disease, we're already immune, and we don't get sick. The first vaccine was developed by an English doctor named Edward Jenner. Jenner lived during the 1800s when many people were dying of smallpox. Cows got a similar disease called cowpox, but it wasn't as dangerous as smallpox. Now it seemed that people who were exposed to cowpox, particularly farmers who spent a lot of time milking cows, appeared to be immune to smallpox. So Jenner inserted the matter from a cowpox sore into 2 cuts on the arm of a healthy 8-year-old boy. The boy then became infected with cowpox. 48 days later, Jenner introduced smallpox into the boy's arm. Sure enough, the boy didn't get smallpox. Today, we have vaccines against many diseases that used to be fatal. A quick injection can protect us against mumps, German measles, tetanus, polio, or hepatitis B. Has anyone ever felt your forehead to tell if you were sick? They were checking to see if you were unusually warm, a sure sign of fever. You see, normal body temperature is around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, but your temperature rises when you're sick. Fever is a sign that your body is working harder to fight a disease. When you're sick, your body produces more hormones, enzymes, and blood cells, and this increased activity makes your temperature go up. Your blood circulates faster and you breathe more rapidly. This helps the body get rid of harmful waste faster and more efficiently, and that helps you get better. But you don't want to have a fever for too long. After 24 hours, it may start destroying body protein that's necessary for life. And a very high fever can be life-threatening. But don't worry. If need be, you can take medicine to bring a fever down. Have you ever gotten over a cold, but the thermometer said that you still weren't 98.6? Don't worry. Although 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit is considered to be average, your temperature can be as low as 97 and as high as 99.5, and you may be perfectly healthy. Some people just naturally have a higher or lower temperature than others. Also, your temperature changes in different locations in your body, and the temperature goes up and down about 1 degree every day. It's usually highest in the late afternoon and lowest after midnight. Your temperature can climb slightly on a very hot day or when you're involved in a lot of physical activity. It can even go up after you've eaten a big meal. You probably know that cancer is one of the major causes of death in the world today. But do you know just what cancer is? Cancer is the uncontrolled growth of abnormal cells in the body. You see, normal cells grow in the body all the time. They mature, die, and are replaced by healthy new cells. But cancer cells are different. They never mature. Cancer cells just stay young and keep multiplying until they harm the body by making it impossible for normal cells to function properly. So the normal healthy cells die out and the cancer cells take over. Anyone, young or old, can get cancer, so it's important to have regular medical checkups. New treatments for cancer are being developed all the time. They may include surgery, medicine, and radiation procedures. And although we still don't have cures for many forms of cancer, we are making progress, and lots of people who've had it are alive, active, and cancer-free today. Although researchers haven't definitely pinned down what starts cancer cells multiplying out of control, they do know certain things that contribute to your chances of getting cancer. Smoking, for instance, is very unhealthy and dangerous and is a major cause of lung cancer. So don't smoke when you grow up. It's definitely not worth it. Air and water pollution have also been linked with cancer. People who have been exposed to asbestos, an insulation material that used to be put in a lot of buildings, are more likely to get a type of lung cancer. And lately, doctors have been warning people about getting too much sun. Certain rays of the sun, even on cloudy or hazy days, can promote skin cancer. So be careful about too much sun tanning and avoid getting sunburned by wearing a hat and sunscreen or sunblock lotion. Have you ever seen a pool of water shimmering on a hot street, only to discover it's not really there? Well, that's an optical illusion, a trick that our mind plays on us. It happens because seeing is done not only with the eyes, but also with the brain. The eyes are the organs that receive visual impressions, but it's the brain that tells us what we're seeing. What helps the brain make that decision? Well, it takes less energy to move the eyeballs from side to side than from top to bottom. That's why we think the horizontal line in this famous illusion is shorter. Sometimes there are several different ways to interpret the information that the eyes send to the brain. There's no right or wrong answer to this kind of optical illusion. It's just a question of which picture your brain picks up first. Here are a few well-known illusions. What do you see? You've probably guessed that although the top line seems shorter, both lines are actually of equal length. Is this hat taller than it is wide? Actually, the height and width are equal. Do you see a flower vase or the silhouette of two faces staring at one another? Don't tax your brain. They're both correct. Believe it or not, these long lines are all parallel. They are the same distance apart at the top and the bottom. It may look like the figure on the right is taller, but actually they are both the same size. Which of the two lines on the right is the continuation of the line on the left? It may look like the top line, but it's really the bottom one. Black, white, brown, red. If everyone's skin serves the same purpose, to cover and protect the body, why do you suppose people have different colored skin? Well, it has to do with chemical processes in the body and in the skin itself. In the skin tissue, there are special color chemicals called chromogens. They have no color themselves, but when certain body proteins called enzymes act on the chromogens, they produce skin color. A pigment called melanin is present in everyone's skin. It has a brownish tint, and sunlight makes the body produce lots of melanin. That's why people in countries with a lot of sun usually have darker skin. Carotene, another pigment, gives a yellow tint to the skin, and all the tiny blood vessels just under the skin produce a slightly red tint. Your skin color depends on how all these colors combine in your body. All human skin colors come from these pigments, just in different mixtures. Have you ever wondered how we get suntanned? Tanning comes from the sun's action on the brownish skin pigment called melanin, the same pigment that gives us our normal skin color. When you're out in the sun, the action of the sun's ultraviolet rays speeds up production of melanin in your body. The increased amount of melanin makes your skin darker. We used to think that getting a suntan was a healthy thing to do. Now we know that too much exposure to the sun can be very dangerous. Too much sun over the course of years may cause skin cancer and give you wrinkles. Doctors recommend that you use sunblock to protect your skin from the sun, regardless of the normal color of your skin. At one time, people, especially women, did everything they could to get rid of freckles. They were considered unladylike. But nothing worked, because freckles are just another kind of skin coloring. They're produced by the pigment in the skin tissue called melanin. Melanin comes from special cells that are scattered throughout the lower layer of the epidermis, which is the thin outer part of our skin. These cells are called melanocytes. Sometimes a group of melanocytes bunch together and you get a freckle. Freckles vary in color, and they get darker in the sun. So you might as well start thinking those freckles are cute, because they're here to stay. For hundreds of years, people have been telling each other how to get rid of freckles. For instance, people used to wash their faces in watermelon juice or buttermilk. Another supposed remedy was washing with water that a blacksmith had used to cool a hot horseshoe. Or you could wash your face in dew, provided that you did it before dawn on the first day of May. Then you'd have to wash with dew 7 times that morning and 7 times for the next 6 mornings. If you preferred rubbing to washing, there was always the ripe strawberry or sliced cucumber that supposedly removed freckles when rubbed on them. But don't run out to the produce section of your local supermarket, because none of these so-called cures work. Pimples are one of the least enjoyable parts of being a teenager, but most people have to deal with them at one time or another. Sometimes people get blackheads. These are black dots which form when your skin pores get plugged up with natural body oil and hard, dead skin cells. If the pore opening is very small or badly plugged, the oil never reaches the skin surface at all. Instead, it forms a whitehead, a small whitish bump with pus in it. Acne is a condition that is very common in adolescence because hormone changes cause the skin glands to produce a lot of extra oil during the teen years. The oil usually reaches the skin surface through small tubes called pores or ducts. But if the pores are blocked, the oil can break through the walls of the ducts. This causes pimples. Luckily, pimples usually go away in a short time. But if your pimples are very severe, you should see a dermatologist, a doctor who specializes in skin problems. Most pimples are a normal, temporary part of being a teenager. But sometimes they can be a sign of a more serious skin disorder or even a disease. If you get a lot of pimples on the body, it's probably a good idea to go to the doctor. If they're caused by an internal problem, then medication applied directly to the skin won't do any good. In fact, it might damage the skin permanently. Some people squeeze pimples to make them go away, but that's a bad idea because it makes it possible for bacteria to get into other areas of the skin and cause an infection. And the pus you're squeezing out is really bacteria, dead cells, and white blood cells that have collected to fight the infection causing the pimple. To avoid pimples, it's better to try to keep your skin and hair clean. Eat a proper diet and just bide your time. You'll grow out of it.